Rockstar Games, and Nintendo. Saying those two gaming companies together in one sentence, it's a very weird combination at first. But even before Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars, Rockstar have released multiple games on Nintendo consoles throughout the 2000s. Midnight Club Street Racing, Grand Theft Auto Advanced, Smuggler's Run, Table Tennis, Bully Scholarship Edition, and even Manhunt 2. But most of these were just secondary ports for those who didn't have the main system Rockstar were truly aiming for. There wasn't a GTA 3, Vice City, or San Andreas for the GameCube, for example. Okay, mostly because Nintendo didn't have the hardware to make them technically on par with the PS2 and Xbox versions, but it's not like Nintendo had to rely on mature titles like these to be successful. In fact, their system lineup back in the late 2000s, the DS and Wii, these are among the best selling of all time, and they accomplished it by targeting an audience beyond the average gamer, as demonstrated with games including Wii Sports, Nintendogs, and Brain Age, to name a few. Oh, and having the most iconic first-party IPs at their disposal. That said, there was no rule in their headquarters saying that Wii and DS games couldn't be rated MA15+ or mature. And speaking of portable titles, this review is sponsored by a portable title. Raid Shadow Legends, a fantasy RPG relying on boss battles and one of the most popular mobile games available today. Why? Well, here are the top 3 reasons why you should download it. It's completely free to play with over millions of players, so it's not like you're alone. There are countless customization options and has some of the best graphics a mobile title has to offer. That's actually more than 3 reasons, but I think you get the point by now. And as we reach close to Christmas, Palarium Games have a present shaped like a treasure to offer. A legendary champion based off MMA and pro wrestling legend Ronda Rousey. And you can get Ronda for free by logging into Raid and playing the game for 7 days between now and February 20th, and use this code to unlock additional rewards for Ronda, including a 3-day 100% XP boost, 500k silver, and 5 full energy refills. Also, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get your exclusive rewards in Raid right now, and if you haven't started playing Raid yet, click the link in the description below or scan the QR code on the screen right here where you'll receive unique bonuses worth $30, including free Epic Champion Tyrell, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 Ancient Shard. That should give you an easier head start. This offer is available for 30 days and for new players only, so download and play Raid Shadow Legends today. Anyway, Rockstar Leeds. First formed in 1997 as Mobius Entertainment, the developer focused primarily on handheld games, and it was the Game Boy Advance port of Max Payne that got them acquired by Rockstar. The renamed Rockstar Leeds would go on to make PlayStation portable versions of Midnight Club, The Warriors, Manhunt 2, as well as the Grand Theft Auto Stories titles, so a very solid resume for a developer that specializes on handheld consoles, and with a perfect vision to develop a dedicated GTA title for the Nintendo DS. And this wasn't just a lazy port based off one from the main series like the Game Boy Color or Advance. Rockstar wanted something that would not only break the typecast of simple games on that system, but rival Nintendo's own best offerings including Pokemon, Mario, and Zelda. And most of the early development was spent making bigger and bigger explosions, throwing cars and peds around, and generally seeing how far they could push the action. However, the DS being the smallest AAA console from a technical perspective at that time, they couldn't just use the renderware engine and make an even more compromised version of Liberty City or Vice City stories. Some of the goals they set for themselves included a map with a dynamic weather system, a day and night cycle, and a stable, consistent frame rate during gameplay. They even initially had plans to recreate the entire map from Grand Theft Auto 4, including the final island, Alderney, but was taken out so they could flesh out the parts of the map that were familiar to GTA 4 players. Although whenever they needed to compromise, it was mostly the result of putting themselves in the shoes of a player taking this game on the go. For example, there's no spoken audio, no voice dialogue in the cutscenes, since it's unlikely you'll be able to hear what's being said if you're playing this in public. So whatever solutions they had for situations like these, they'd be the kind of creative ones that made it a standout title from the series, including comic book style cutscenes, cel-shaded graphics, and touchscreen events. At the end of the day though, Rockstar wanted a Grand Theft Auto title that utilized the strengths of the DS, while anyone could pick it up and think they were playing a GTA title on the PlayStation 2 without even thinking about how the controls work. At E3 2008, Nintendo officially announced Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars for their DS, and that it would retain the gameplay that made the franchise such a hit with its own custom engine to suit the console's limitations. And believe it or not, based on the comments from 2008, reaction was mostly negative. Yeah, really, it's kind of funny to read this nonsense in hindsight. And it's only when the first snapshots of the game came out where the reaction's a lot more positive. It certainly took me by surprise when I found this game browsing through in an electronic store magazine. After a delay pushed the release date well into next year, since Rockstar North were also working on Chinatown Wars in addition to DLC for GTA 4, and Take-Two Interactive supposedly wanting to spread the release dates for their games, Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars was eventually released from the Nintendo DS on March 2009, just a month after Lost and Damned, the PlayStation Portable half a year later, and the mobile in 2010, so it's strictly a handheld only game, which made it challenging to record footage for. For example, when I reviewed Liberty and Vice City Stories, they were just the PlayStation 2 ports. I know I talked a lot about the history of Rockstar and Nintendo together and Raid Shadow Legends at the beginning of this video, but we're looking at the PSP version being played on the PlayStation Vita and TV. Some of the graphics and control mechanics might be different from the DS or mobile version, but regardless of what version you have, you're not missing out on the full experience. Another massive request from you ladies and gentlemen, this is a review I've worked on since early 2019. I was on holidays for a couple of weeks and the only thing gaming related I had at the time was a PlayStation Vita with a surprisingly high number of classics to play on the go and a phone to take notes. I also didn't have anything to capture footage off portable consoles until this year when Twitch streamer Lance McDonald lent me his PlayStation TV, and only a month ago figured out how to bypass the HD CP protection and capture footage so I can finally review this game. So if you're watching this, Lance, thanks again, you're the unsung hero of this review. And before you ask in the comments section, yes, this also means I can review Gran Turismo PSP in the future as well. It'll still be a while, but at least it's possible now. Set a year after the events of GTA 4, Hsin Lee arrives in Liberty City to transfer a sword for the Triads, the Yu Zhang, that was won in a card game by his recently murdered father. However, the moment he steps off the plane, the meeting is ambushed with his escorts killed and the sword stolen. Believing that Hsin was dead after a bullet swiped the side of his head, he was thrown in the trunk of a car and dumped in the river. But he was able to regain consciousness, smash through the window and escape. The sword was meant to be used for his uncle Kenny to become the future boss of the Triads, but instead, it opens the window for other gangsters looking to become the new leader, and Hsin finds himself inadvertently caught up in the power struggle before intercepted by corrupt detective Wade Heston, who offers to help him find the missing sword in exchange for capturing the thieves and get internal affairs off Heston's back. As is with a lot of GTA titles with stories containing a few twists and turns, that's all I'll say to avoid spoiling it. It's harder to connect with the characters without the spoken dialogue at first. I would have thought they'd add it to the PSP version, kind of going back to the story for the sake of presentation, which fits best for a GTA game. They don't have the kind of history worn on their sleeves like Nico Bellic, but most of them have a unique personality that makes you either like or hate them, or in my case both. I'm on the like to hate them. Even Hsin has a massive smart-ass attitude. After all, he's the son of a high-ranked gangster who had everything he wanted, spoiled, lived the high life, and now that it's gone, he has to earn it himself. So the character development is there. I suppose how else would you act if you're always hanging out with gangsters and corrupt officers who are endlessly irritating? The right type though, this is how a typical gangster behaves. Additionally, it follows a lot of the tropes taken from GTA titles before and after, probably the most obvious one getting tied with a corrupt officer and being forced to cooperate with him in order for both parties to get what they want. But each passing hour becomes more captivating to watch, and unlike most titles in the series, it doesn't come to its conclusion in a snap. Throughout most of the game, so many gangsters and feds are trying to find answers, and there are nearly a couple of dozen missions just trying to find out who the rat is, so there's always a sense of uncertainty, no concrete villain, and it motivates you to keep doing these missions to find the answers, at least when playing it for the first time. And I like that it's canon with the HD universe of the GTA series, even if there are no returning characters from GTA 4, Lost and Damned, or The Ballad of Gay Tony, only the gangs themselves. But I'm glad there isn't, because it doesn't really need them. It's set a year later and there would be too much of a distraction. Honestly, I think this has one of the better written plots compared to the rest of the series. I was quite impressed. And I also like how it balances between the serious and over the top, like Hsin is just as believable in the cutscenes as he is blowing up 172 cars at once. Let's not forget that the same person who wrote all these classics will always remember fondly. He wrote the story for this game too. And speaking of the cutscenes, it looks the part too. Each character has their own theme which fits their personality and intent, and it utilizes a cel-shaded comic book style. It reminds me of the Metal Gear Solid titles on the PSP. It's a really good way to make the game look visually pleasing whilst not needing to push the technical limits of a game console unnecessarily. And it carries that cel-shaded style into the gameplay, whereas the PSP version, the color balance resembles more closely to Grand Theft Auto 4 and uses a fully 3D render of the map. Now the cel-shaded character models remain. Either way, it's one of the most vibrant GTA titles ever made, kind of like an anti-GTA 4. It almost makes you think that maybe Rockstar made a GTA title that's suitable for an ESRB teen rating. Short answer, absolutely not. It doesn't hold back one bit on the mature content. I mean, there's a mission where Zhou wants to get someone out of intensive care while in the ambulance just to cut his heart out. It has more profanity than any other Nintendo DS title out there, maybe even on the PSP. The people of Liberty City are just as crazy as you'd expect, and drug dealing is one of the core gameplay elements, but I'll get to that. In hindsight, GTA Advance and even the PSP titles trying to recreate the 3D universe were too ambitious for a console to handle. The frame rate for these games spoke for themselves, and in the case of the PSP Stories titles, only the gameplay which made these games classics salvaged it in my opinion. It might not look like it today, but this was endlessly fun. And having at least 80% of this on the go is an impressive feat in itself. Chinatown Wars, on the other hand, this is a game that feels like it was made for portable consoles in mind. The developers wanted to make a hybrid of all the GTA titles that came before, the top-down view of the first two, the crazy high-level action of the 3D universe, all set in GTA 4 Liberty City, just without the final island Alderney, and with a few alterations including the omission of bridges that go over roads, and very rare moments you enter a building are exclusive to the PSP version. Like you can't jump off the Empire State Rotterdam Tower this time. Charge Island, for example, the highway intersection is replaced with a standard one. In GTA 4 you'll see the roads from above, but you still see a resemblance of the road placement. I mean, to implement a map designed for the PS3, Xbox 360 game and compress it for a Nintendo DS follow-up, this is very impressive. You see little background details like crime from others, the satirical adverts, and a few sound effects and dialogue cues from GTA 4. I kinda wonder if they consider using sound effects from GTA 1 and 2.
We've got the 1024 in West Babylon.
Though despite putting countless hours into GTA 4, there were rarely any moments where I was like, hey, I recognize this spot, apart from this park on Outlook. It's only when you're jumping between the two main islands going across the bridge is when you start to know where you are at all times. It takes a while to get used to at first since you can't use elevation or building heights to help with memorization. It also doesn't help that you spend most of your time making sure you don't hit oncoming traffic since this is technically overhead. You obviously can't look as far ahead as the 3D titles. What I hated most about the top-down view in the first two GTA games is that it's impossible to see what's ahead, and it leads to unconventional, unwanted attention, or even death. However, CTW, the camera stays in front of you even during rotations. You can always lock yourself forward by pressing up on the D-pad, and is lowered down a little bit so you can see more of what's ahead. Not always, but it's good enough that it doesn't ruin the experience. It's like the race and chase it was meant to be. You're basically driving remote control cars in a city made of Lego. The developers also wanted every vehicle on the map to be unique in terms of how they handle and take damage, with a sheer volume to, well, perform a Grand Theft Auto on. It's something I don't think about thanks to the smaller screen, most of them look the same, but at least the volume of fast cars with a stripe in the middle is relatively high, just makes them easier to set on fire before I reach my destination. That's a challenge when you're on the road, driving as fast as you can while avoiding traffic and glancing the map all at the same time. Unfortunately, there are no planes or helicopters, only the enemies get to fly them. But there are boats, which are fine. However, motorbikes, if you can tell by the increased rate of hitting traffic, I wouldn't bother riding them unless you have to for a mission. Feels like there's a strong magnet attached to the front of the headlights and is clinching onto literally everything in sight. I also wasn't a fan of the shooting mechanics at first, and always felt like Huang would shoot wherever he wanted, sometimes the opposite of where the enemy is, and when you're on foot it usually locks onto the closest person, not the biggest threat, and was wasted a couple of times as a consequence. I swear I failed these missions at a way higher rate than the 3D titles, partly because I haven't played Chinatown Wars as much, but it's less margin for error thanks to the lack of cover, allies that beg to die, and it's easier to get busted than wasted, which causes you to lose all your weapons. And it's harder to re-equip everything back, particularly around the first half of the story mode where everything's locked in ammunition. Most of the time you use a pistol, you're just standing still waiting for the enemy to die because it's such a pathetic weapon. But it was until I had a larger variety of weapons to use without worrying about running out of ammo, it suddenly felt like it was accurate enough. And you can use the D-pad to change your target, which is something that took me until 3/4 in the story mode to figure out when there were enemies taking cover at multiple angles. That said, the strategy was always the same: fire when the enemy stops doing so himself, or let the enemies come to you so you can pick them off. But for a 13-year-old portable title, considering the limitations and compared to the other top-down view titles in the series that don't even have an auto-aim system, this is a huge improvement. The weapon selection is as over the top as it should be, even if throwable weapons take some time to get used to. It's easy to accidentally press the shoulder button L instead of R, throw something and get caught in the blast. But it's actually decent overall. Like the driving, it's good enough to get the job done. It encourages you to stay out of cover and just hold the trigger button without the risk of instant death. It depends on the style over substance approach to compensate, while at the same time the developers are trying new things with the DS. And you get a taste of that right from the first mission with the way it utilizes the touchscreen, whereas in the PSP version you use buttons and the analog stick, which is also pretty cool. Although I'm worried what all that spiral rotation might do to the stick in the long run, especially when playing it on the PS Vita. I call it Mario Party syndrome. I thought these events would get tedious, but they're mostly different and kinda satisfying to experience, including setting up a sniper rifle, arming bombs, breaching your way through locked doors, making Molotov cocktails. Makes you wonder why petrol stations exist on this map if cars never have to be filled up with, well, petrol. Maybe that's why people in Liberty City need their Molotov cocktails, right? There's a better sense of interaction with these quick time events, like they're somehow better than a lot of other games that also include them. Maybe it's the visual style and how often they differ whenever one pops up. The only concern I would have is how annoying it would be switching between the stylus and buttons back and forth, especially if you're not expecting it. But since I'm using the PSP version, it doesn't matter. Also unique to the series, and the part where I'm risking the video's monetization just talking about it, but whatever, here it goes. The way it works is, you can buy and sell different types of recreational drugs to dealers all across Liberty City, known as the pharmaceutical and healthcare business, at least according to Kenny. And the goal is to make as much money out of whatever product you have in your backpack. There's an alternate map which details all the gangs in Liberty City and their preferred supply and demand, with more than one dealer in these highlighted areas. And they all have their own rates, so the steps are to go to one location, sell at another one, and the final step is profit. Additionally, you'll receive special tip-offs of dealers selling product at a discount for a certain number of days, so keep your eyes peeled for them. And the heat, because the police will occasionally bust in, and if you get wasted/busted, you lose all of your supply. There are some missions where you'll need a specific number of a certain drug to unlock the mission itself, and some where you find one after completing one, so it's something you'll be doing throughout the entire story mode, and is essentially the only real way to make money. It's fun the first few times you need to do it, but after a while it's almost as tedious as another game I reviewed a few years ago, Scarface: The World Is Yours. Whenever you need to undertake in the pharmaceutical and healthcare business, it has that same sense of repetitiveness, especially when you know which routine earns you the most money. I also find it weird that you can deal with all gangs across Liberty City, including the enemies of the Triad. That would have been a good idea. You can only deal with certain gangs based on the Triad's relationship with them, and also try and find out what the gang's personal preferences are yourself, since having the map with all the answers right off the bat, it makes it too easy and like a chore at the same time. Find which gang's highest demand is the most expensive drug, rinse and repeat. And like GTA 4, there isn't any real use for that money apart from weapons and safe houses. Like, there are no vehicles, outfits, or businesses to buy, at least nothing mandatory. I can sort of understand why. It'd be hard to fit in lots of unique storyboard cutscenes with all the different unique outfits Hsin can wear. But don't expect the kind of character customization you'd expect from, I don't know, San Andreas or even Vice City stories. Thing is though, Chinatown Wars isn't about unlocking everything the typical criminal desires and making Hsin look like a billionaire with all the fancy suits in the world. If it's a portable title, with the amount of space you have available compared to a home console, you should be focusing more on gameplay variety and the action on screen, and this is where CTW shines as a solid title on its own merits. It replicates the 100% checklist from the 3D titles for better, including snub bonuses, rampage tokens, noodle runs, and for worse, including taxi, police, ambulance. I feel like the older I get, the more I dislike these missions. It's hard to describe how much content is available since the checklist is similar from the main series. It's scaled down of course, but it doesn't feel like it when you're playing this game. Things like phone loading updates every once in a while. If you're under a bridge or building, you won't receive any messages. Car damage and car handling is unique, just little details that make GTA Chinatown Wars feel like it maintains the same quality and care Rockstar put into their main titles. This phone is basically the main menu for everything and replaces the internet cafes, most of the spoken audio, and checking on your aforementioned pharmaceutical and healthcare progress. So you'll find yourself highly dependent on the menu to a fault. It reminds me of the home screen on a PlayStation Portable. There's a lot more fiddling around with pausing and unpausing to unlock the missions, and quickly talking about the map again, it doesn't appear the second you pause it unlike the rest of the series. Even Liberty City and Vice City stories did this. When you're looking around, you can't zoom in and out. Sure, they've added bookmarks, but it's handier to know where everything is in a snap. It's what I'm used to. You know what it feels like when someone forces you to change your routine for... Okay, this is honestly a nitpick, but you get what I mean. Oh, and I almost forgot, going out into the city and rampaging like you're every person in Liberty City put together. But I'm sure nobody's gonna do that. It's not like I ever mentioned it in any of my GTA reviews, right? The wanted system also differs to every other GTA title in the series. Yeah, commit crime, wanted level goes up, I'm sure you all get how it works. But it's not about how far you need to be to evade the heat, but how well you can maneuver your car like a battering ram. Instead of staying out of their sights, which you can do if you only have 1 star, you need to destroy their vehicles. The more you break, the faster you lose them, and the bigger the heat, the more you need to destroy. And it's not as counterintuitive as it sounds. The number of cop cars to smash is indicated clearly, and I really like the cop car destroyed sound effect for some reason. My strategy is to near miss the traffic since cops don't realize I'm not the only one on the road. This is actually the most fun part of Chinatown Wars, being at a high wanted level and trying to lose it. I mean, it's not like I can use the drive under the train tracks trick I usually use whenever I need to escape an extremely high wanted level without a cheat code, but seeing the flashing red and blue lights illuminate around the screen at night, the sound effect when the car gets total Burnout style, it's really exciting. Maybe that's why it reminds me of Burnout. And as a handheld title, if you find yourself in a situation where you need to kill a little time, a puzzle game will do just fine, but instead replace it with a quick rampage across the streets of Liberty City. I played this outside the house a lot more than inside it, and it made road trips and waiting times feel half as long as a result. I haven't beaten this game since 2019, so although I knew the ending, I actually forgot about the final few missions that led to that point, and there was so much unadulterated action to keep up with, it leaves you up on your toes until the point it says mission passed. Added to that, you're almost always doing something different in the missions, and it utilizes as much of the map as possible. And despite my feelings about protecting other characters, it has a good difficulty curve. You can even replay missions without beating the game first. I like that they're described by Hsin. All in all, it took around 10 hours to complete all the story missions and still had 53% of the game left to go. It's taken roughly the same amount of time to do the same thing in Liberty City and Vice City stories, so for a portable title, deal. There's plenty of content, some better than others, but story missions and rampaging are the best bits. Honestly, if I had to pick between the three, I'd rate Chinatown Wars above the others. It's kind of hard to compare it to these two since, again, they were 3D universe titles compromised to work so you can play them on the go. But this one was made for a portable console in mind, so it runs better, there's more content, and their experience allowed them. Leeds I'm talking about made it easier to improve the overhead style from the 90s era. I'd be curious to know what Rockstar Games could have accomplished if they made a GTA title on the 3DS, Vita or Switch. Maybe an enhanced remake of the first two in one collection with the gameplay style and mechanics of Chinatown Wars. Knowing Rockstar, it certainly would have been one of the best for those systems, but I guess there weren't enough copies of this game sold for it to be worth finding out. It's one of the main reasons CTW was ported to the PSP, because it sold so poorly on the DS. And because it takes over half a decade and all the Rockstar divisions needing to work together just to make one game, the only realistic way we'll ever see a successor to Chinatown Wars is if it's made by an indie developer with Rockstar Publishing. Honestly, anything would be better than this. If I had to take a GTA title with me on the go, which, yeah, that's how I wrote a good chunk of this review, coincidentally, it would be this. It's a loud, colourful, vulgar, free-for-all experience that provides 80% of the thrills from the main series, but it's portable. It goes to show you how little you need to compromise to end up with a scope that can match with the rest. Just make it smaller in scale and more cartoony. Thanks everybody on Patreon for your support on this channel, particularly Bribs, Brittleback, Cooper Munn, Darcy McIntosh, David Myers, Eric Barboza, Ian Walker, Indie DM, Mayeed, Mike Camilli, Moak Bal, Thomas Rosendahl, and VXL, Palarium Games for sponsoring this review, and of course all of you for watching. I admit I'm gonna cop a lot of flack for sponsoring Raid Shadow Legends, which is practically a meme at this point, but that's business for ya. Anyway, GTA Chinatown Wars, I got it off the PlayStation Store in 2019 so I could at least have a way to play it and gather notes before I work out how to capture footage of either the PSP or DS. As I said before, I completed 60-70% of the script for this video while sailing on a cruise, and when I finally got my hands on a PlayStation TV, thanks again Lance McDonald, and worked out how to capture footage of it, I knew GTA CTW was going to be the next review. Also, in case you don't know, I recently did a game testing video with Square Eyed Jack. Check it out on his channel, the link should be in the outro and description. It's hilarious, I strongly recommend it. Don't forget to also like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, support on Patreon, follow on Twitter, Facebook. Thanks again for watching, and speak to you soon. Adios.